In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we speak to Kristie. We talk about how AI helps in developing people across the organization. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, the show where we discover the truth behind contemporary HR. I'm your host, Benjamin. Join me as I unfold today's talent ecosystem with HR innovators from around the globe. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today, Kristie. It's great to have you on.
Great to be with you today as well. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. Kristie, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
So I am Christy Pambianchi. I am the head of human resources, the chief people officer at Intel. And I've been practicing human resources for almost 35 years now, and head of HR for 18 years. And I've had the pleasure of working at Pepsi my first 10 years, at Corning for 20 years, where I served as the chief HR officer for 12 years, Verizon as the chief people officer for 2 years, and now at Intel just under 4 years.
Wow, that's quite an impressive career. What did make you choose HR in the first place?
So what was super interesting is, at first, as a high school student, I think we can all agree that not many of us in high school knew what human resources was. And I actually had the fabulous good fortune of being an exchange student in Germany. And so I lived in a small town called Marsberg, Germany, and I went to 12th grade at a time when gymnasium went to 13 grades. I traveled all over Europe during that time with my classmates, and I had applied to college and I got accepted to Cornell, thinking I would study business in the labor relations program, but also possibly pursue a career in law and international relations. And so at college, in my studies, I really started to fall in love with this entire practice and learning all about the world of work and the role that work has played over the arc of history in people's lives. And so I actually did an internship in a law firm, and I did not like it. And I did an internship in an HR management program at General Electric, and I loved it. And so I felt like I found my calling. And then I actively pursued landing an HR job upon graduation. And so I can't advocate enough for get internships and try things out. And I really felt like that was where I was meant to be, at this intersection of business and work. And one of the things I learned as a kid growing up, I watched my dad navigating his career, my mom before she passed away, my aunt, and you learn kind of firsthand the role that work plays in people's lives. But then when you study it and you really realize it's everything, the job
Indeed.
someone has is the core of the quality of life they have, that their family has, their social mobility, their access to things like education or other quality of life elements, housing, healthcare, et cetera. So I really kind of fell in love with the concept that I could have all of that impact I wanted to have, but do it through a position in human resources where I'm going to help companies optimize their human capital, but help people lead fulfilling lives because they found great work.
Well, that's an awesome summary, since, HR should actually be the operating system of a company, right? So it should be like the place where everything comes together, since, in the end, it's people that make a company great or make a company, suffer.
Right. Exactly. And when you think about, especially once you get to a C-suite position, or if you talk with CEOs, which I'm sure you do and many of your listeners do, you realize you kind of only control like two things: allocation of capital, like financial capital, and allocation of human capital. And then they have to obviously create and carry out the strategy. So it's pretty exciting to contribute to that.
It indeed is. I'm wondering, you just mentioned you have been around for quite some time. So what were the major challenges you experience, in particular, accelerating through different levels, corporate levels, to the C-suite then?
So one of the things I learned as a kid growing up, I watched my dad navigating his career, my aunt, and you learn kind of firsthand the role that work plays in people's lives. And when you think about, especially once you get to a C-suite position, or if you talk with CEOs, which I'm sure you do and many of your listeners do, you realize you kind of only control like two things: allocation of capital, like financial capital, and allocation of human capital. And then they have to obviously create and carry out the strategy. So it's pretty exciting to contribute to that.
It indeed is.
So I would say, if I think about my career, when I started out, I have this kind of approach to life where I think about it in 10-year increments. So when I was graduating college, I was 21, and I thought a lot about what would I want to achieve in my career by 30. And I was at Pepsi, and it had, pretty well established HR career path. And I was able to do two, what they called field assignments, where I was in two business HR roles, very junior, spread very, very thin, firing line, front line, every minute was different. I learned so much. The accelerated rate of my learning was so high. And their next stage was to bring you into the corporation's center and do two COE type assignments. And so then I did my next couple of years in assignments working on organization development and competency modeling. And I learned a lot about OD. And I had in my field assignment learned a lot about labor relations and a lot of frontline business work. And so my aspiration by the age of 30 was to be an HR director, which was in the company I worked in, like a large role, the entry of executive ranks. And I would have a team and a business team that I sat on. And so that really helped. It really helps to know like where you want to go. And that was really important to me. I knew I wanted to stay on the business HR side, but I couldn't have ever gotten there without those COE experiences. Because in a field business role, you are literally surviving everything that's coming at you. I call it the inbox survival exercise. And you want to try to carve out a few long-term things, but you still got to do the day-to-day. And you're usually pretty lean and no resources. In a center, all of a sudden, you're thinking about how do I solve a problem for a large group or for the enterprise? Your time horizons are different. Your stakeholders are often much more senior. So it was a lot of skills I didn't have that I was able to develop that were then essential to succeeding as an HR director. And then when I was 30, in having completed like 2 years in an HR director role, I was at an injunction and I said, okay, what do I want to do next? And I thought, well, I really want to do the work and try to aspire to be a chief HR officer. I would love the opportunity to run an HR function. And so that was what I spent the next decade really trying to get the right foundational experiences to be qualified and do the work to have that opportunity. Versus I actually compared that to, or would I veer off and get a doctorate and go into academia so that I could teach and help expand the function and build the pipeline for the future. And so that was where I went. And at 38, I moved to Corning at 30. And at 38, I was offered the head of HR role. And I stayed there till I was almost 50. And as I was building my plan from 50 to 60, I decided I wanted to take it to larger companies on a larger scale, and have had the amazing fortune of working at Verizon and Intel.
Well, we talked about history a bit when before we started recording, and I found actually quite interesting. You have been in HR for quite some time. Working with frontline workers, and then of course moving up the corporate ladder. When you think ahead, so how do you picture the next 10 years?
So that's a hard question. So when I was turning 50, I'm in the middle of that decade now, I started to say, what do I want to accomplish in this decade? And so I want to keep doing what I'm doing, but I also want to not only help the companies I'm working at achieve their strategy and have the human capital they need to win, but I really am focused on, in addition, building the HR teams at the companies I work at so that the HR teams that I have can have the kind of impact that they want to have, and that the talent on the HR teams can achieve their personal goals of why they came into the function, what they hope to achieve. And then also working outside my company, outside the four walls with my colleagues across the space of HR to help build and evolve the function. And so that's what I'm kind of optimistic and hopeful to do for this decade. And I feel like, I'm not done yet. And the world is always changing. And so each decade was really different. And this decade so far, and it was kind of shocking to celebrate 2025 because I remember celebrating 2000 and working on Y2K at Pepsi, and I was the HR director for the IT function. And then I lived through, the dot-com crash at Corning and helping them with a near-death experience, the financial crisis, and now this big boom into AI and how transformative that is into the world of work. So I do think that this decade has a huge tech accelerator that's going to have a big impact on the world of work, somewhat like the advent of the internet did 20 years ago. So it's kind of exciting. No decade, no year is ever the same.
Indeed, and you just mentioned the evolving of the function of, well, HR in general, of the chief HR officer. What do you think will change most in the next few years?
So we've had a vision for a very long time to have the sort of operational and administrivia parts of HR be done really, really well, highly efficiently, highly repeatable, have great customer, employee satisfaction scores. And I think over the years, technology has evolved to help us do that. But now I feel like that's going to be table stakes. And I think the advent of AI is going to help us realize another vision that we've had as a function for a very long time, which is really to empower employees to lead and drive their own development and manage their careers. And we've had a lot of platforms, a lot of tools. We've done job architecture, learning libraries, leadership engagement programs. There's many flagship examples of this from some of the greatest companies in the world, and consulting support teams, et cetera. But what I love is some of that still is reliant on the individual manager or the individual employee to kind of go find it. And even where we've got some push technology, it's still a bit of, let me stop what I'm doing and go do that. And now I just kind of love the idea that as we get these AI agents, it's like everybody can have a buddy. Everybody can have their own personal AI coach, whether I'm a manager and I want that AI coach to make me a better manager, or whether I'm an employee and I really want that AI, coach, like kind of pushing me like, hey, Kristie, wait a minute. 80% of the people that are in the same job as you already have these 2 extra certifications. How about I add them to your Q3 schedule? And, that's amazing. And I think that's like, companies are piloting some of that stuff. And I think in the next 24, 48 months, that's just going to be real. And it'll probably be on somebody's phone, and it'll be like just a completely mobile, fluid app. The other thing I'm really excited about is I've always sort of wanted a highly transparent labor market. And I always feel inside a company, like I want my employees in the company to know as much about their opportunities in the company as they know about their opportunities outside the company. And I never want the internal labor market to be less fluid or transparent than the external labor market. And that's hard to achieve because managers are running their departments, they have their jobs, they have their priorities, they don't want to lose their teams. But yet, I can't control what people can find out about the outside market. So I kind of think these tools and platforms are enabling a lot more gig assignments. Hey, you know what? I have 10 hours free this month. Maybe I could work on due diligence for an M&A transaction because I never got to do that. And I don't want it to be a full-time assignment, and I'm filling in the cracks on someone else's team. I'm expanding my network. So I kind of think the technology is going to enable a lot of that as well. And so when I look all the way back, that's all going to be great for employees, but it's also great for companies. Because if you can retain your talent longer, if you can optimize the way in which people's skills are being utilized or grown, that's better for the firm too. So I'm pretty excited about the possibility. Now, I do think there's routine tasks, data summarization, report writing, dashboards, things like that, may be obsoleted or replaced by AI, but I believe that will create capacity for people to do other things. And so I'm sort of betting on the imagination of what people will do creatively with their newfound capacity.
Well, I have so many follow-up questions. I really loved what you said about AI helping to empower employees. That also moves HR or the people function in a kind of different a kind of different level of importance, I think. So it will help the HR function to be there, well, for every employee at every time, well, to help and to bring the entire level of productivity of the company to completely new spheres.
Yeah, and I think the way we have to approach it is like any new technology, invite people in, invite the collaboration, give people, reward them for finding a use case that's great for them. And I think of places in my own life, like I would love if I went to the doctor and they were able to, say, instead of me having to answer the same 50 questions every time I go about, my family history or the last 10 things, but they'd be able to scrape all of my data, every scan, and be like, oh, and now spend the 20-minute, half hour, whatever with me, like, hey, how about this? How about that? And the AI can tell them, oh, test for these 4 things. So I feel like there's just so many ways it can make all of us perform better. And we know, for example, with the computer chess game, right? The computer will beat the human, but the human plus the computer beats the computer. So I'm a human plus person, and I think that the computer can do a lot of that, rapid assimilation of data and pushing forward some things that you may not have triangulated that would be interesting to check on. But then you as the human are applying your judgment based on your experience in a way that the AI is not going to necessarily do. So I'm a human plus person.
I really like that. You just mentioned, well, the AI will also help us to, well, to free capacity, that we can focus on other things, to be creative. What we as humans are very good at, being creative, if we are allowed to be creative, and we are not in shackles. What do you have in mind when you make up your mind about, well, where can we be creative? Where can we as humans be most useful?
Well, I think there's certain tasks that have to be done like efficiently and effectively really matter, production, when something has to be made to a spec, or, accounting has to be done to a level of accuracy. So I think on those type of tasks, we should be looking at ways in which technology can drive accuracy, reduce variability, take out human error. I think on creativity, product development, go-to-market strategies, understanding new markets, understanding consumer needs, feedback loop cycles, listening to employees, all of that are spaces that could drive a lot of creativity. And, I think sometimes a lot like creativity and new ideas come from voices that weren't being heard. So hopefully it creates a space for all of those ideas to surface.
I'm wondering, in particular, in a company like yours, where you have, well, people in the headquarters, people in the in the factories. How do you ensure that, well, everyone is informed? So those people who walk around in these very, very fancy white kind of,
we call them the bunny suits.
The bunny suits, okay, I love it. Well, they don't access properly the internet, not all the time, while desk workers do so. So how do you ensure a level of equality there?
So we have an intranet, and we have a very, very active communication push to the intranet. So employees can access that even on their off hours. So we really do want to have high engagement with our employees. We have shift meetings. We have a lot of two-way communication. And then even inside the fab and inside the operations, high engagement. And we think communication with a workforce it's so important. So I can't underscore that to any of the listeners on the HR podcast that, think about that employee communication, two-way. You want to make sure that you're getting the right information to your employees, but also that you're listening to them and you're meeting them where they are and you're hearing what their issues are. And instead of trying to address it right on the spot, just listen and make sure you're hearing, and then come back with or assign more people to do some follow-up, to do some additional listening, to help co-create solutions. So I think, if I were looking at my 20-something self, I felt on the spot I had to fix all the problems that got escalated to me. And as I got, more mature and more experienced, it was actually the people want to be heard. And then after they're heard, if you follow up with, okay, here's what I'm going to do next, and whether it's here's the people that are going to work on it, or what you're going to do about it, or more information that you need to do something about it, that's the best next step.
Well, in particular, in a very huge organization such as yours, how can you listen to people? So you have people around the globe, tens of thousands of employees. How do you listen?
Well, that's a good point. We do pulsing surveys. So we have, an annual larger survey. That's a census survey for the 100,000 plus employees. But then once a month, I'm going to do a spot survey. That's a shorter survey that's going to hit, 10% of the organization. And we're going to be hitting on regular questions so we can do trend lines, but then also some spot questions that are topical.
It's very cool. Kristie, I have a few closing questions for you. Since, well, you have been in the HR space for 35 years, so I think you mentioned before, you have interviewed very many people, and I'm wondering, what are your go-to questions? So the questions that tell you most about a person.
First, I always want to know somebody's story. Like, who are they? What's their story? I always find that's so fascinating. And for me, I actually just truly enjoy meeting people and learning about them. And then second, I try to understand what they're looking for in a job and how they believe the job that I'm speaking to them about is going to help meet that objective. And I don't often spend a lot of the time that I'm with a candidate understanding, do they have the rote qualifications to do the role? Because I kind of take that as table stakes. So you have the minimum requirements of the role, make sure you're talking to candidates that meet that. So then in these interviews, you're really looking at, like, is this a fit? Meaning, is this aligned with what they're trying to accomplish? Have they thought about the culture and the values? Is that how they like to work? Right? So if someone loves to be on a team, but it's an individual contributor role that's going to be fairly isolated, it may not be a deal breaker, but you want to make sure they understand that, or vice versa. So I find those are the kind of things I really lean in on in my interviews.
Kristie, thank you so much for your time. It was a great pleasure talking to you. And well, it's amazing to hear about your story, your career in HR for so many years, and then also your vision. It's really cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all your listeners.
And also big thanks from my side, and see you next time.